Hi, everyone, and welcome to The X, a podcast from inside Silicon Valley about how experience shapes everything from products to businesses to entire industries. I'm Brian McLean, and I'm here with Demetrius Madrigal. We have a super interesting show for you today because we had some big things happen this week in tech. And one of the main ones was about Netflix. So we're just going to jump right in and get started. Good morning, D. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I kind of feel like I expected this from Netflix. I don't know if you felt the same way, but I felt like looking at everything that was going on and some of the decisions that they made, that this had to come at some point.
Yeah, so what actually happened is Netflix earnings time came and their report came out. And basically, they had lost subscribers for the first time in 10 years. And this is something that people didn't predict or anticipate. They actually anticipated there being a couple more million users added to the platform. Instead, it lost users. I know that you and I have talked about this before. We have talked about Netflix from many different angles. It's a beloved company. I feel like they really pushed everyone into streaming, but it sits on a single pedestal, right? It isn't like other companies like Amazon or Disney or Apple, the others, where they have all these other things going on in services, and then they have this additional streaming service with content, right? That takes up, let's say, 1 or 2% of their total revenue, right?
Yeah.
Um, Netflix is all in on streaming only, right? And I know they're getting into
Mhm.
gaming a little bit now, but they've been telling everyone for a while that, hey, we're kind of reaching saturation here in the United States. We're expanding overseas. We want to try to get into gaming. I almost feel like they were letting us know that things were going to start to stagnate a little bit. But I think
Mhm.
once the war in Ukraine hit and they lost 700,000 subscribers because they pulled out of Russia,
Yeah.
inflation hit, and there's just all these other things kind of happening. Here we are. I would love to get your take on whether or not you think this is just a proper readjustment of where Netflix should be from a financial standpoint, from a content standpoint, or if this really is kind of the end of the road for growth with Netflix. Like this is just kind of like, okay, here we are. This is how many users we have, and we're probably not going to be able to grow from here, like some people are predicting.
Well, I think they'll still be able to grow. It's just that they boomed for a while, and they're I. We'll get into the kind of their content strategy. I wasn't a huge fan of it, and I've talked about that before. I think that there are two major things pushing this kind of drop right now, and those are, they pointed to the war in Ukraine, but that accounts for 700,000. Like pulling out of Russia accounts for 700,000 people subscribers lost. They in this past quarter lost 200,000 total, so that means that they gained 500,000 kind of outside of the Russia extraction. I don't think that anybody's getting back into Russia anytime soon. That seems like it's gonna kind of trend more towards a South Korea, where it's just or semi permanently at least kind of out of bounds. And then the other factors are things are opening back up again. People are spending more time outside and not in their homes quite as much. And then there's just so much competition now from
Uh-huh.
so many different streaming services. I think there's a lot of subscription kind of fatigue going on, and that those are I think those are a lot of the reasons why this is kind of hitting all at once.
Hmm.
They are projecting to lose 2 million more subscribers, so they've lost a net 200,000, and they're predicting 2 million more. That's probably the biggest kind of concern, and a lot of it is, I started kind of looking through comments and things, just gathering a little bit of information, and talked to a couple people, and then they feel like relative to a lot of competitors, they're expensive. The content isn't better, and it's kind of filled with like a lot of bad movies too. And there's just so much stuff to subscribe to.
Yeah. Let's talk about a couple of those things that you had mentioned. So first of all, competition. So right now, the true competition, I'm not going to talk about all the small ones, but the true competition is basically Apple Plus, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime Video, and maybe to some extent network television when it comes to like taking people's time away, right? Like their
Yeah.
time being dedicated to some form of entertainment. So one of the interesting things about content, I've been thinking about this a lot, is that it really is an art in the sense that you can't use big data yet. I mean, to some extent, but like you can't use it yet to say like if you make this film, it will be the most popular film on Netflix, or if you make this show, it'll be the most popular show. They have indicators that things will be interesting based on people's interest, previous things that they've watched, that kind of stuff. But there still is some art to it in the sense that you're putting it out there and just seeing what happens. And you would notice that things get picked up on certain platforms and then they just kind of take off. And then people go,
Hmm.
oh, now I need to be part of that platform. We don't want to be part of 5, 6, 7 platforms. I don't want to be paying like $10 a
Yeah.
month for every single thing that exists. And you and I had talked about this and we said early on, I think in one of our first podcasts in season 1, and we said, you don't want streaming to get to the point where it was with cable, where you have 400 channels to choose from and you have to buy
Yeah.
packages and it costs you hundreds of dollars a month. The whole point of it is that you can kind of a la carte pick things that matter to you and connect with them. Well, there's a caveat to that, and that's good content comes out in a lot of different places. And so people want to be
Hmm.
part of those services just to watch one or two shows, those anchor shows that drive you in. There's a lot of competition now, and a lot of this content is really good. If you look at talk to most people who have signed up with Apple Plus, they've only signed up with Apple Plus because of Ted Lasso, right? And
Hmm.
now I forgot what the other one is called, but there's a new one that's out that's very popular on Apple Plus. People are part of Amazon because they already pay for Prime. People are part of Disney Plus because, well, they pretty much own the catalog of some of the most amazing and awesome shows that have existed for the last 50, 60, 70 years, right?
Yeah.
And then with Netflix, they're coming up with stuff on their own, right? They're
Yeah.
funding billions and billions towards new programming and hope to get that hit, right?
Yeah.
It's a tough place to be, and I give them props for where they are and how they've gotten there. But it is a tough landscape now, and this storm that you talked about between Ukraine, inflation, competition, low unemployment, getting the pandemic under control, it all kind of hit at one time, and here we are.
Yeah. I actually don't think that inflation kind of has very much of an effect on this. Because you think about what inflation usually does, and it increases the availability of currency. So people would without the price continuing to climb, I don't think that it would have too much of a negative effect on them, other than the fact that they're potentially paying more for other items. But and
Well, the,
one of
the
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 worst.
reports that I read on it, just so you know, kind of where that angle is coming from, when I wrote in
Hmm.
one of our comments and there was inflation, was that because of inflation and people, like you said, are spending more on other things. When
Hmm.
push comes to shove, if they're not getting the content that they want on Netflix, they're more likely to cancel it
Yeah,
because they're
I think
spending
that's
money
gonna.
everywhere else. Yeah,
I think that's gonna be the case a lot of times, regardless
yeah,
of what inflation is doing. I think because it is a low price item that, in the general scheme of things, I think that is going to have less of an impact. I'd see more of an impact on like going to the movies, but movie theaters are actually doing really well right now.
yeah,
Um, so I want to make a quick note about competition. So I think there's going to be a lot of people who think about competition for Netflix as far as like, oh, Disney Plus and Apple and HBO Max and things like that. But you're also forgetting that there's competition for the dollars, and there's also competition for time and eyeballs.
yep,
And if people are finding that they're not watching Netflix because they're being attracted to other things that maybe they're not spending money on, but they're still spending other time on, those are things like YouTube and Twitch and TikTok and the other things that are entertaining.
hmm
Then they're going to look at like, okay, I'm not getting my value out of Netflix. And then from a content perspective, Netflix and kind of engaged in the strategy of we're going to release a new piece of content every day, and the reality is most of that just wasn't very good.
yep.
And they were like, all right, well now I've got my 37th kind of clone of Christmas Prince, which I didn't want to watch in the first place. So now I've got more stuff to sift through in order to find the good stuff that I want to watch.
I think that model is based on the idea that we don't have historical content that people are craving or want to go back and watch all the time. We're got to create new stuff all the time, keep people interested, right?
Yeah, I think that there's a difference in the way that Netflix is run as opposed to a organization like Disney or Warner Brothers. And of course, those two different companies can do the same thing in different levels of quality. But one of the differences between Netflix and like a Disney, for example, is that Netflix tries to be largely a distribution company. That's kind
Hmm.
of where they started, and they still have that kind of in their DNA. So while Disney is the major leadership is much more involved in the creative process, it feels a lot like Netflix is like, all right, we're gonna we're gonna get these really good creators on board, and we're gonna let them
Hmm.
do what they want, and we're gonna get out of their way and just let it be awesome. And I think there is, to some extent, a contribution from leadership in like Marvel, for example, with Kevin Feige, where the contribution is important and it's relevant. And we see this, I think, with movies like The Irishman, which was just like there's a good movie buried in like this 4 hour slog,
Yeah.
and that's kind of one of the things that I think for Netflix is like their upper leadership is just doesn't quite understand as much the creative process. And if they did, I think it would be easier for them. I think that what they try to do is kind of like this YouTube model of like, we'll throw everything out there in the kitchen sink because for YouTube, it works because they're not paying for it. People are contributing on their own.
Yeah.
For Netflix, they're just trying to create everything, and then hopefully something in there will become the next Star Wars or becomes the next Marvel or the next Indiana Jones. That's kind of what they need is they need a franchise, and I know that people feel like franchises are eating the movie industry, but at the same time, there is a happy balance. And right now, other than Stranger Things, I don't know what Netflix has that is gonna keep people engaged and coming back.
I mean, there was a show on Netflix about going to Mars, and it was so good. I was so hooked on it. And then after the first
Mhm.
season, they were like canceled,
Yeah,
and
they
I
do
was
that all
like,
the time. It's
I was
really
like,
annoying.
man, yeah. And I was like, man, that was a really good show. Like, why did it get canceled? I was like staying up late at night watching it and everything. It was really interesting. Um, and I don't know
From
where all
personal
that.
experience, I could say is that every time they do that, it makes me not want to engage one of their shows because I'm like, am I going to get my hopes up and end on a cliffhanger or something, and it's just going to get canceled, even though it was a good show and it got a good viewership, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how all those decisions are made, and I'm sure it's very complicated from a financial standpoint because you're paying for all this, this stuff to be created and the creators and all that
Hmm.
kind of stuff. But I think their model, when you're talking about them not understanding the creative process, I think they kind of do understand the creative process. They just happen to choose a strategy that was slightly different than other people. I think their strategy was, we get directors, writers, and things like that really
Hmm.
understand the creative process, and we give them free reign. So we
Yeah.
just say, hey, you make whatever you want. We're going to option you for 5 shows. So I think they did that with Adam Sandler, for example. Like, I think he's got like a 5 or 7 film option on Netflix.
Sure.
And so he gets to kind of produce whatever he wants, within reason, obviously, and put it on the platform because he does really well and that kind of stuff. And ultimately, like, those things, probably tend to do quite well from a eyeball standpoint. But if you think about it, some of these deals are like hundreds of millions of dollars, right? So you have to get
Sure.
quite a response. So when they said, "Hey, one of the things that we've been considering, but we've never really wanted to do, but we're considering it now, is adding advertising to a tier."
Oh,
My first initial thought was like, "Ugh, I hate advertising," right? But then there was
yeah.
another part of me that was thinking about YouTube and how well YouTube does because of its advertising on its free tier. And I thought,
Hmm.
well, I guess if you did a free tier, or something that was really cheap, like $5.99 a month or something, those advertisers would pay a lot of money for those eyeballs. And so it would generate a lot of revenue, but it feels like the wrong direction. But I think that's only because I hate advertising. Like, it annoys me from a content perspective. I think advertising is fine in regard to like the process of it. But like, when it comes to watching something, you get hooked, you're in it, you're feeling it, and then boom, an advertisement hits and you've kind of lost the flow. And so from a UX standpoint, I don't like it that much.
It comes down to this. I think you can either have advertising or charge people. You can't do both. At least not for a single tier. You can't have charge somebody, you know, $5.99 and then also have advertising in. If it's a free tier, fine, but I think it's really hard to do a free tier when you're paying to produce all this content. Netflix can do it and Twitch can do it because they're not paying for the content, right? It's being contributed
Yeah.
by individual creators. For Netflix, it's like, all right, well, now we're going to I assume some subset of their library, which is, I mean, it's really broad, but not that deep as far as quality, and then make it available to people. So what you might see is a bunch of paying subscribers cancel and take the free tier.
Hmm.
Maybe a bunch more people come in and do the advertising tier. I don't think it's the solution. I think
Well,
that
let me give you a scenario, and you tell me what you think about it. So right now, I think Netflix is $12.99 a month. I don't even know. I'd
it's
have to double check.
$20 a month.
Was it $20 a month? That's how much I'm paying now. Great. It just automatically takes out
I
of my credit
believe. Let
card.
me double check real quick. But yeah, last time I looked, people were complaining that it's $20 a month. Okay, so there is a basic $9.99 a month
Okay.
for in the US. And then there's the limitations are you don't get HD or Ultra HD. For $15.49 you get HD.
Okay. So
So that's compared, just quick comparison. Disney, $8 a month for Disney Plus, and you get the HD.
yeah. So yeah, because they're kind of like hitting them from the angle of both content and price. So here's the thing. Okay. So here's the scenario. So right now, let's say you're paying $9.95 a month. I think most people probably do that one. I think I do that one. I don't even think I pay for like the HD.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so if I told you, okay, $9.99 a month, you watch all the shows just as it is right now, and nothing changes. For
Mm-hmm.
$4.99 a month, you get all the same content except for advertisements are injected in the beginning, middle, or possibly end of the show every time. What if they did both? Do you think people that are paying the $9.99 are going to want to go back to the $5 and have ads injected? And then also, if they're injecting ads, I mean, that could be hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue for the company.
No, I think I'm looking at. They already have three different tiers. Now you're adding in multiple more tiers, and
Yeah.
then it's kind of like gets really muddled. And I already don't pay for Netflix because they keep canceling shows that I like. So like what I'm hearing people do, which is ultimately something that I think that everybody's going to have to deal with, is they sign up for these programs for like 2 3 months, and they watch all the things that has come out in the past year that's good, and then they cancel and move on to the next one.
Yeah.
And I mean, from a pricing competitive perspective, like Disney Plus is $8 a month, so it's cheaper than Netflix, and there's more stuff on Disney that I want to actually see, despite the fact that they've only been producing original content for that platform in a short period of time. Plus, you look
Yeah.
at their release schedule for Disney and Star Wars stuff, and that's just kind of baseline things. There's going to be more like Pixar and Disney original movies also. And it's just, I don't know as far as the amount of quality kind of anchor content. I don't know that Netflix can compete with the content, and they're being outpriced.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I do think about it and I go, I think the best thing that they can probably do would be to kind of roll back some of this programming that's not doing quite well and just start canceling some of those deals and like doubling down on the ones that are doing really, really well. Right? Like
Well,
they
I
have
think,
so much stuff
yeah.
on there. You're like, where did this even come from? Do they even pay for this? Right?
Mhm.
But like really looking at the stuff that people truly love and like focusing and doubling down on that and then keeping their price consistent. And then the other thing that they mentioned was possibly cracking down on password sharing, which
Yeah.
here's the problem with that. Now I totally get it, right? They have a
Okay.
huge number. I think isn't it something like 25 to 35% of all households are sharing their passwords with someone else. So I think it's like a big number, right?
Hmm.
Did you look at that? I don't know if you looked at the number, but it was like
I didn't look at the numbers. I don't know that it matters ultimately, because people's
it's
assumptions about how
huge.
people respond to people assume like, okay, well, they're getting this for free now because of password sharing. So if we cut it off, then that means that all those people were going to sign up, and that's not the case. I think I saw some research. I have to look it up, but it's like 10% of those people might sign up. And I look at this password sharing, and there are people I know who have Netflix just because they don't even watch it themselves. It's because people they know who are in their family who are close friends use the account. So if
Okay,
they
so
crack down
let me
on
pause you
that,
there. Let me pause you there for a second. So that is something I definitely wanted to tap into. But so it's 100 million, 100, what does it say? 100 million households are sharing passwords.
Mhm.
So they
Yeah.
know this number, right? Okay. So what you're talking about is definitely an experience driven thing that has been around
Mhm.
for a really long time. To me, it feels very cheap and petty to say like, "Oh, I want to start cracking down on you now." It's like now
Yeah.
I feel like shamed. I feel like I'm doing something wrong. I feel right like I mean they're kind of
Well, you're
almost
treating
feels
your
like it's
customers as the enemy, as like, "Hey, you guys
yes.
are criminals. You need to stop." They'll get if they crack down at 100 million. I wouldn't be surprised if they had 10 million new signups and 40 million cancellations.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it could cause a lot of cancellations as well because people get frustrated, right? But do you remember the time
Well,
when
it's not just
Netflix
that.
raised
Like
their
it's a value proposition. This is like, okay, this is a value proposition. This is part of when I signed up for Netflix. I knew I could share it with some people that I care about, and now you're taking that away. So it's like you're removing a use case from the service. So that's just like from like an additive value standpoint, you're making the service less valuable by doing so, but you're not
Mhm.
dropping the price. So it's essentially like a cost increase. It's another cost increase.
You
So
know what I think I would
people
have done
don't
if I
lose a
was
lot of
them?
users that
I think I would have not mentioned that if I was them. I would have just slowly worked on it. And the way you work on it is you just make everyone reset their password every once in a while. You send a note out saying, "Oh, we're reducing sharing down to only, two households or something." And you quietly take care of that on the back end and watch the numbers come up. I think
way.
mentioning that in an earnings call, it makes it look like you're desperate.
Well, what I would do is I would start trying to provide incentives for people to have their own personalized profiles, and then I would cut down on the number of profiles that people had, so that when you know how you sign in and you click on your name and it brings up all of your recommendations and stuff,
Yep.
fewer of those, and then add value to having that profile, and that could be some exclusive content, that could be better personalization, those things, so that there is motivation for people who are likely to actually buy it. There are people who are you're targeting the people who are actually likely to convert,
Hmm.
because the reality is if you get into kind of the actual research around this, people who aren't paying for your service are probably not going to pay for your service just because you try to manipulate them. They've already made the decision that they're not paying for your service, and you're the idea that you changing their mind by through a policy change is probably not going to do it. You need to provide additional value, provide additional access to that value.
Well, I do see that there is a lot of people who are just kind of used to doing something the way it was done, but maybe they don't mind paying for it if they actually find value or joy in it. And so I almost feel like there could be like a positive way, like you said, of saying like, "Hey, create your
Maybe.
own profile and sign up for your own service, and you get all these special benefits." Like, and just see, that would kind of pull out, as you're saying, that would pull out the people who are like, "Yeah, I really like the service, I'll pay for it." And. But the thing is it's weird and interesting because every service does this, right? Whether it's
Mhm.
Disney Plus or anything else. I mean, to some extent, even Amazon Prime is shared because
Yeah.
you could purchase things on Amazon Prime, have them shipped to any one of your friends' houses. You
Hmm.
can, allow them to make purchases by logging into your account, right? So it's kind of a known entity that pretty much, if you
Yeah.
have a service where a password and a username are entered, then those are going to get shared and people are going to use them. But that also means more people are using them. But then that also comes back to what some analysts were saying, which is like, well, if you have that many people that are so interested in watching Netflix and just want to be part of it, maybe that's
Mhm.
a good thing to have advertising because that means that you have more eyeballs on the service and you'll make more from advertising than you would from just selling subscriptions.
I think that there's a ways to work in advertising in a way that doesn't hurt the viewing experience.
Uh-huh.
You can have kind of ad rolls in the, or not ad rolls, but like you can have static ads in the interface. You can have and no pop-ups or a video playing like the news sites are doing. Those are terrible. You could have something showing up like check out this thing that you might like during the playing next pre-roll, right? There's ways to kind of integrate it, and that doesn't hurt them, but at the same time the issue is subscriber growth. So you're not going to help subscriber growth by adding advertising. You're just going to help revenue. So
Hmm.
you're not going to get the subscriber growth unless you can add value to your platform. So ultimately, like all of these things about like all of these things are lowering the value of the platform. So you might be able to get more revenue out of your existing users, but you're going to have fewer users. You're going to lose subscribers in the
Yeah.
long run.
What do you think
The
Netflix is doing really well?
I'm struggle for that right now, honestly. I think their interface design is pretty solid, but I think everybody's kind of stabilized. I'm not a huge fan of the carousels, to be honest. I think they're okay. I think they do a good job of personalization and providing the recommendations is pretty decent. Beyond that, I kind of struggle to find out what they are doing better than their competitors at this point. I think
Yeah.
their technical background is really good. Like they're able to deliver dynamically the best quality to your internet connection as possible, so it plays buttery smooth. So from a technical backend perspective, I think they're very strong. I think.
They are. Yeah. They actually, I know people who have worked there that are like super, super high end engineers that
Mhm.
focus on streaming and stuff like that. And yeah, they're really killing it in that sense, you know, because they have to. That's their whole business, right?
I think a lot of other platforms struggle with it, to be honest, and
They
they
do.
are
You
do
watch
much
them and
better.
they're slow and all this stuff, and I'm like, what are you doing
Hmm.
differently that makes it so that it's so clean compared to other platforms? But I
Yeah.
think they do a really good job with that. I think they're like I said, I think their UX is really good. I like some of the things that they've done with previews and promotions and stuff like that. I feel like the platform itself is functional and good. Like I think there's a lot
Hmm.
going on there. I just have struggled with content. I feel like it's 50-50. I sign in and I'm like, am I going to grab something that I want to see or am I going to go on to some other service? I remember the other day, just I'll give you a little story. The day I was sitting there
Hmm.
and I was like, I think I want to watch something related to surfing, right? And it seems like most of the good surfing content seems to be on HBO for some reason.
Hmm.
And then I'll find some on Amazon. So I went on Netflix and started searching. There's really nothing on there, right? And so
Hmm.
I jumped off Netflix. I went to another one. I found myself spending 15 minutes bouncing between all of these different icons on my Roku, and then at the end, I watched nothing.
Yeah, that's an
Right,
issue.
right, and that's an issue. I used to go onto Netflix and I would just browse around. Boom, I'd be in a show. And I think I don't know what it is. I just feel like there's so much that you almost get overwhelmed, right?
Yeah.
And we knew this was coming because we talked about it in season 1, right? Which is like we're getting back to the old model, except for now tech companies, own this space. But like the old model was you have 200 to 300 channels and you pay $100 a month and you watch 2 channels.
Yeah. And I feel like their content strategy is getting back to like, all right, we're going to pump out a bunch, we're going to pump out a ton of B movies, but we're going to leave kind of the blockbusters to the Disneys of the world.
Yes, but remember they lost that exclusive right or whatever it is. Bob Iger cut ties with them. You know what I mean? Because he knew he was going to be building Disney Plus, so they don't like
Well,
license
what I
them
read
any of
is
their
that
content.
Netflix ended those agreements early.
See, that's not what I heard. See, I heard that it was Bob Iger was already coming to a point where he was like, we're gonna extend the agreements for a period of time, and then we're gonna slowly taper them off because we're
Yeah.
starting our own service.
That's what I heard also. And then what I understood is that as far as Netflix could have had more seasons of the shows that were being shown on their platform, but they ended it early.
Yeah. I don't know. Their management has overcome quite a few things, actually. Like if you
Sure.
look at
Yeah, they've had
from
some
where
ups
they
and downs.
started in the beginning and stuff like that. So I do think that they can probably overcome this, but they're not going to overcome it in the way that people want them to. So overcoming this could be, like you said, providing more value to your customers. Looking to grow overseas, maybe by providing more value to those individuals that live in different countries and that kind of stuff. But I think right now there's this fire of like, oh no, the stock dropped,
Hmm.
38% in one day. We don't want that to happen either. So how do we solve that problem? Right. And I don't think that that problem can be solved without solving the first problem, which is we need better content. You need to probably cut
Yeah.
down your costs. Your costs are really high when it comes to creating new content, and just get on board with like listening to your customers, and I hope they don't go advertising. I mean, if they do, then I wouldn't buy Netflix with the advertising model. I'd probably still just pay the $10 a month if the content was good and have no advertising because I feel like I'm past that. I don't want advertising anymore.
Well, I'm fine with advertising, but the content isn't. It for me. It all comes down to content, and I the feeling I get when they cancel good shows that maybe weren't getting enough viewers is that the leadership is disconnected from the creative process and not invested. They don't care about these shows. They're just numbers on a ledger to them,
Yeah.
and that's not what they are to me. And so I have a hard time of like, okay, well, this show came out and it sounds great. Squid Game was great because it was kind of built to be a single season. But I'd be nervous about getting into a new Netflix show that I wasn't confident they weren't going to cancel after the first season. I just don't want the commitment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there definitely is this argument of like when you're investing all this money into building a show and then you do a really good job making it, but it's only
Mhm.
servicing a tiny small community, you start to think, well, maybe I need to cancel that show because I need to be producing shows that are hitting the broader community, right?
Well, that's the part of the issue is they aren't really. There's not too many, right? There's a small handful. Even Stranger Things, which is I think one of their biggest hits, is
Yeah.
very genre. It's very specific. Like somebody who isn't into scary content isn't going to be into that. Same thing with Squid Game was another one along those lines. And then you have shows like Money Heist, and that one's another kind of genre film show. To sum all this up, I'm going to ask you what would you do in order to try to fix the problem for Netflix?
So I think the first thing I would do is trim down the content. Honestly, I would get in there and I would start looking at things that aren't getting a lot of views and stuff, and I trim it down so that within the interface, people are seeing a lot of really good,
Um,
high quality content that they love. That would be like the
would you
first thing I
actually
would do.
remove things from the platform that were
Yes.
already produced?
Yeah. I would
Oh
remove
wow.
things that just aren't getting traction. I just don't think that when you give a sea of options to people, they feel like they know what to do. I think they get lost. And I feel like it's not about how much you have. That's what Amazon's doing. They want to have the biggest catalog in the entire world. But Netflix should be about quality, right? So I think I would trim that down a little bit. I love the interface. I think it works well. I think everything is good on that end. Definitely focus on not having an advertising model, but having a price that everyone can afford with content that they love. And
Mm-hmm.
then when it comes to like password sharing and stuff like that, yeah, I know that's a little bit of a problem. Maybe I would try to slow that down a little bit. 100 million is a lot of a lot of people. And then the next thing I would do is if I was going to get into gaming and stuff like that and trying to expand out what the company's capabilities are, I would really consider purchasing studios or streaming services that can connect with Netflix and will keep people on. So they're watching a movie and then they want to play a game, they pick up the controller and everything is within Netflix. But it's got to be
Mm-hmm.
really good, high quality content. I think standing on one leg, I think everything being about streaming and media, not just media, but streaming and movies and television shows is putting all your eggs in one basket. I think you have to broaden just a little bit. I know a lot of times we say you got to focus, focus, focus. But the difference is this is a media company. And media companies
Mm-hmm.
typically have a couple arms, right? They have news and then they have movies and then they have their gaming division and they have, I think it's time to broaden a little bit and to kind of see what other next billion-dollar opportunities available for this large company.
Yeah, I think we're remarkably close on this. What I would say is I probably wouldn't remove things from the platform if they're already there. I might bury them because there might be people who really like some trashy like romantic comedy somewhere, and they want
Yeah.
to go back and watch it again because they really liked it. Uh, but I would kind of change up the production model. I would like try to get somebody in there who is really passionate about films, and I would make sure that they are at a high level of interest of influence within the company. That this needs to be somebody who's like a C-level executive who's just who swings a big stick and has a lot of ability within the company to choose direction.
Hmm.
And I think they need to be more involved in the production process and kind of ensuring that they can try to grow some major blockbuster franchises, some art house films, some more kind of uh, guilty pleasures like the Adam Sandler movies that you said,
Yep.
and have a little bit more variety because it's for me when I think of Netflix now, it's almost all the trashy kind of low budget kind of guilty pleasures
Yeah.
and not enough of the other kind of content. There's a
Y-
few really high quality movies like Mudbound, but for the most part, they don't have enough variety of experience there. And
I
then
should I
you
should probably
touched.
correct. correct myself on something here. When I say remove it, I'm under the assumption it costs them money to keep it there.
I think they own the rights, so I think it's just like hosting a few gigabytes on a data center somewhere.
Because there's a huge benefit to typing in something like 51st dates and suddenly it's there and you just watch it, right? But
Yeah.
I definitely look at it and I'm like, I looked at their budget, the amount of money that they actually spend on content and stuff
Hmm.
like that. And I would want to trim that down a little bit. You know what I mean? I would want to be very focused on where that money is going because, they're spending billions of dollars, right? So I guess
Hmm.
in my mind, the assumption was if it's on there, it costs them for it. But maybe if it doesn't cost them anything, yeah, you're right. You bury it and you hide it, but it's searchable.
Especially for stuff that they've produced themselves and they own the rights, then I think it should stay there. One of my major complaints of Netflix is there's something there and then it's not. And you were like, I'm just gonna watch that next week, and you go back and it's not there, and it's a terrible
Mhm.
experience. So for it to be there, maybe bury it, and then like I know it's hard. There's a reason why people keep remaking like Star Wars movies and new Marvel movies and new Batman movies and not try to develop new IP. But I think they need to develop new IP. And I think it needs to say, like, we're going to create a franchise that you love, whether it's an action movie or whatever it is, and kind of be those movies that get people in the seats. They need a movie that would do $1 billion in a movie theater, and
Yeah.
or $1 billion in a movie theater, and have that on their platform, because it's lacking right now, and it kind of like it kind of really constrains the experience. And the other thing is what you said about gaming. Like, they need to get into different avenues of media. So whether that's music and podcasts, whether that's books, whether that's gaming. I think gaming is the big thing. Gaming is where the most money is in media right now. And if they can provide a streaming kind of cloud platform where most of the like rendering is done on their end, kind of like what Google tried to do with Stadia, release some good games, I think that could end up dwarfing the movie side of the business over time.
All right, let's talk about our next topic here, which kind of shocked me actually. Is CNN Plus got shut down in its first month in operation? D, what happened with this?
Well, I mean, they got off to a slow start. They had, I think, 150K users within their first couple weeks, and that's on the low side. And then it was, for what it was, I think it was might have been a little expensive at $6 a month, which on its own is not terrible. But when you can take into account that this is just another thing in your massively growing subscriptions list, then it's just people look at it and say to themselves, "Do I need to pay $6 a month in order to get access to more CNN content?"
Mhm.
And then the third major kind of axe that fell was they came under new ownership with Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers has been very explicit about trying to get a lot of their different streaming content under kind of one umbrella and not have it separated out into multiple services.
Which makes sense. You log into whatever Discovery or whatever it is, and then all of this content is available there. Now, when they say that they shut down the service, does that actually mean that the people that were producing content on it are still going to be able to produce that content in potentially other places, like on Discovery
I,
and that kind of stuff?
that is unclear.
Okay, that's
Potentially,
unclear.
I mean, some of this stuff might be moved to CNN. I think that it's kind of like when Quibi got shut down, right? It's the individual shows still exist, and
Uh-huh.
they have the option of continuing on. Some of these shows on there were like Anthony Bourdain shows. Some of it was older content,
Yeah.
but the platform itself, like if you go to your CNN Plus app on your phone, you're not going to find anything.
I see. Yeah, because I read that New York Times article that was written about CNN shutting down, and one of the things that they said was that, and I'm quoting this: at any given time, there were fewer than 10,000 people using the service, according to a person familiar with the numbers, who was not authorized to speak publicly. So, if you actually
Yeah,
think about that, there's hundreds of people producing this stuff. I mean, it costs a lot of money to produce these shows to only have 10,000 people using the service at any given time, that's nothing. That's rough. And what I was sorry, I was just one thing I was just going to say is that Did we give him enough time though? It's only we only gave him a month, and then the service was shut down, right? So it's like, what if you would have given them 6 months? Do you think they could have ramped up and had a million users?
Well, what I imagine is that they had a spike in the very beginning, and I think there was another spike, but they probably saw a lot of people drop off and thought to themselves, like, all right, well, this would take a major commitment to revamp the service in order to get subscriber growth to go on.
Yeah.
And why don't we just do that? If we are to do that, why don't we just do that under this other platform? Because the CNN Plus brand itself, as a separate brand from CNN, isn't really established. So there's not a lot of reason to do that.
Yeah, it's hard to build a service that has dedicated content to it and then compete with basically all these big services. I think the
Mm-hmm.
way for Warner Brothers to win would be to have a Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus type of service where there's so much content, such good content that people can't help but pay $5.99 to be on it. But if you're paying $5.99 just for CNN Plus, yeah, that's an additional cost and another thing you have to kind of pay attention to when you already are paying for these other major services. So they gotta
Yeah.
they gotta build up their war chest here of content in order to compete with some of these other bigger services, right?
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing is that it has not been established that people want to pay for news. If anything, what we've established is people are really reluctant to pay for news. And when they do, it's usually something like Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal. And those are coming in at like, what, $2 a month or something like
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
And it's largely because they've put a lot of content behind paywall. So if you're not a major name like that and you're charging a very small amount, and on, honestly, I don't know that. Um, it's just very strange to me to pay for access to information nowadays, because information is not really owned by anyone. It's really their treatment of the information that is kind of proprietary.
Yeah, I think if
So,
you love a service and you like the people there and you want to pay for this kind of like constant flow of information, like, if CNN was behind a paywall, for example, and people just love watching CNN news and that kind of stuff,
mhm,
I think I think they'd pay for it. But, you know, when you're used to not paying for it, like once the internet came out and everyone was like, "Hey, news is free. You no longer have to buy a newspaper," right? People got used to that and they're like, "Oh, it's news. Like it's basic information about what's going on in the world. Like I should get that
yeah.
for free," right? It's like a mentality around that.
Well, I think if I mean they don't own the information, so if like there is public information out about, let's say, like a new legislation, there's kind of ethical issues about saying, like, if you want to know what's going on with this legislation that's going to affect you, then you have to pay for it. Like that, that just doesn't kind of feel right.
No, no, like you
um,
said before, you're paying for the commentators and the anchors
yeah,
and stuff that you like. You can get the content somewhere. Somewhere it's going to be free
yeah,
because we have to allow content to flow for news and stuff for every individual, regardless of their
hmm,
economic status. But like for
yeah,
sure, I agree with you. Like if you really love, Wolf Blitzer on CNN, by all means, pay to see
yeah.
Wolf Blitzer.
So there's a couple things you break this down, right? I think the biggest name on the CNN Plus platform was Chris Wallace.
Yep.
And I mean, he's coming from Fox News, so not a lot of CNN people are going to be emotionally connected with Chris Wallace. I think Chris Wallace is great. I mean, I catch his stuff every now and then, but I don't watch it religiously. You think about who does connect to newscasters, and they tend to be people of an older demographic, who are like, all right, well, I'm used to getting my news through watching a newscaster, and kind of the Tom Brokaw model,
Hmm.
and I want to be able to see, my Rachel Maddow or whoever else it is. So I'll pay for access to that person. And I don't know that a lot of people who are in that demographic are looking for a streaming service that is going to add on to their other streaming services they might have, in order to get to it. So between that, the price, the fact that now anything that's really important is going to be on CNN's main channel,
Hmm.
or their website, or on from a breaking news perspective, it's going to be on multiple websites. And kind of like I've heard the content was good, but I've never saw any of it, which is kind of a sign. And I don't think you probably saw any of it either.
How could you? It was only up for 30 days. I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, It's true, but when Disney releases, or when Disney Plus got released, they put out some stuff that was like, "Hey, you're gonna want to come see this," right? They have like that launch title, to borrow a video game kind of analogy of like, "All right, well, here's your launch title. You need to get in and see this because it's the big thing."
Yeah,
And CNN Plus always felt like very optional. You're going to be maybe a bit more informed. Like I was worried about them monetizing opinion, which I have an issue with. Like I feel like over monetization of opinion is really kind of like generating a lot of the kind of tribalism toxicity, because the best way to get eyeballs on that is just to be really kind of outraged basically, and just get
yep,
people, tell people why they should be mad all the time. And like if you're trying to put something behind a paywall and get people to read it, it's going to be like, clickbait headline, click on this, now you have to pay $5 to find out why you are right to be angry about something that you already agree with.
100% agree with that. Well, I mean, it's a bummer for the people who worked on this, and I know there's a lot of
Mhm.
people that contribute to it and stuff. Hopefully, they can land on their feet and still end up at CNN or part of Discovery or whatever it is. It's always kind of bittersweet. It's like you have a service that maybe people weren't watching that much, and you're like, oh, it's just going to disappear because that's just capitalism. That's just part of the way the game works. But then those are
Mhm.
human beings behind that lost their job or whatever it is, and so it always kind of bums me out when I hear that. But in this industry, though, things come and go really quick, right? I mean, CNN could have a paywall for its service within 90 days, for all we know. I don't know
Yeah,
what their master plan is or anything, and how that's going to work out. But we'll keep track of it and kind of see where it
yeah.
goes.
Well, I do think that you look at HBO and they have some of these documentaries, kind of these long form documentaries about kind of things that are in the news.
Uh huh.
And I think that combined with some of their interview shows could be a place for the CNN brand to show up within kind of Warner Brothers and HBO Max kind of umbrella of streaming content. But
Yeah,
I think it's really difficult to get people to pay for news itself, like in
absolutely.
a subscription streaming service or something like that.
I agree. And just as a side note, you said HBO. I don't know if you've seen the new Tony Hawk documentary yet.
No, not yet.
Oh, but I highly recommend it. It
Oh,
was really, really good. It kind of made me depressed, to be honest with you, but it was really, really good.
oh,
Only
that's
depressed because
unfortunate.
it's like when I see older skaters and stuff, and they're like in a lot of pain and dealing with a lot because, they put their bodies through a lot over the last 30, 40 years
Mhm.
of skating. But it was definitely very insightful into how he thinks and how much of a perfectionist he is, and
Yeah,
how he never ever ever will give up on anything that he really wants to do, like a trick or anything like that. And it was just really good. So if you have a chance to check it out, check it out. Especially anyone
sure.
who's listening, it was super awesome.
There is a lot of like news documentary type of stuff out there. Like I got addicted to Dark Side of the Ring. I don't know if you've seen any of that.
Oh, I saw one episode that you had sent me. That was actually really really interesting as well.
Yeah, and I believe that is produced through Vice and shown on a streaming platform. So there's room out there for this stuff. And I think one of the things that's missing right now from a lot of news content is that kind of long form deep dive stuff. And this could be a good home for it.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about this third and final topic. It's kind of a quick one, but as we were kind of scrolling through the things that were going on during the week, it kind of caught my attention is that reports are that Google Wallet might be making a comeback. And the new icon was leaked last week when Google updated its workspace assets. And it got me thinking, I wonder if Google is thinking of adding crypto into their process. And the
Oh,
reason why I say that is it's a very quiet and sneaky way of getting ready to offer it and compete with Coinbase. So Wallet existed a long time ago. Then they took Wallet away, and then they did
Google Pay.
Google Pay, right? And
Hmm.
then now it looks like Wallet's coming back, but it would make total sense to have Google Wallet. So think about it with crypto in it. So Google is a very trusted brand. Google has amazing security. The wallet already exists, and there's so many Android users, right? And I think you might be able to download Wallet on iOS in the future or something like that. That would be kind of cool. and then suddenly you just start offering crypto purchasing and trading on the platform that would really give Coinbase a run for their money. What do you think about that? And I know this might be a stretch, D, but I just saw that news and I thought to myself, this feels like the right move for them.
I think it's a stretch. So what happened historically is that Google Wallet existed and it was a place for you to keep all of your cards and stuff that was in your wallet. You can keep it in your physical wallet. You can keep it in a digital wallet. And this is not just credit cards and stuff and debit cards, but it was down to like gift cards and like your CVS membership card and things like that. So
Yeah, it's pretty
anything that
cool.
was in there that anybody could scan, they could actually like you would hit the button and it would bring up a like if you were at CVS or a grocery store or something and you had like one of their like rewards cards or something like that, you hit a button and it brings up the barcode and they can scan it. So you don't have to carry all these things in your wallet or on your keychain. So it's a great product. The reality is it didn't actually go away. It just got kind of subsumed into Google Pay. So if you go into Google Pay, you can do all that stuff now. If you don't want to carry around your gym membership card that has a barcode on it, you can literally just put it on your Google Pay right now. What I think happened, and this is also kind of relating to stuff that I expected to happen a little bit, is because people tend to think of apps as kind of single purpose, like this app is for this thing and this other app is for this other thing. The fact that they had multiple different uses within a single app kind of meant that people used Google Pay to pay for things, but they didn't use it for the other features because the features kind of tended to be buried.
I see.
Honestly, that's what happened to me. I used to have all of my cards in my Google Wallet. Then it got subsumed into Google Pay, and I've ever since then I've never used it again. I've never used that functionality again. And part of that is I don't even know if it's got when it got kind of absorbed into Google Pay, if it took all of like my membership cards in there also. I haven't even looked.
Yeah.
I think that the main reason for this is just to separate it from kind of a product usability and value proposition standpoint, so that it's something that stands on its own and people are
Hmm.
reminded to actually engage with it. If they did, I'm going to make a quick point about cryptocurrencies here. It's telling that Google Pay is a platform or an app that's designed to pay for things, and cryptocurrencies by kind of knee-jerk reaction is not expected to be part of Google Pay. It's expected to be a different application. Well,
I
that's
just
kind of your
got
mental response, right? It was just like, oh, hey, there's cryptocurrencies, which are supposed to be currencies. It's in the name, but you wouldn't put that into an app that's used to buy things.
no, because well, I think we all know they're not currencies at this point. I think people have kind of alluded to the fact that we called them currencies early on, but we're realizing we're trying to find a currency that will work. Let's put it that way, like a
Mm-hmm.
stable coin that everyone agrees on. But currently, what we have right now is a bunch of quote unquote assets. And so when I saw the wallet, my first thought was, hey, maybe you could store all your assets in there. If you're storing all your crypto assets in there, then you're competing
Yeah.
basically with Coinbase. So I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say that that might happen. And if it happens, I'm coming back on this podcast to tell you, woohoo, look at me. I picked up early on that.
All right. Well, I if my prediction is if they go that right, I don't think it'll last.
Really?
And it's down to the fact that like, all right, we have to these things that were started as currencies that we treated as currencies, their entire value is the idea that they are the currencies of the future. Everybody is admitting they're not really currencies and they don't have any independent value other than like people agreeing that they are like beanie babies.
All right, dude. When we're not sending you directly to Satoshi Island, you would be the guy from Lord of the Flies or whatever that gets eaten on Satoshi Island.
Now I would go in and be like, all right, well, here's what we're gonna do. We're going to get together and we're gonna design an actual cryptocurrency for the future that is going to be an actual currency and not just an investment. And then everybody will be like, we're not interested in that. The people at Satoshi Island are not interested in creating an actual functional currency. They just want to have investment vehicles.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like at the end of the day, like if these things are considered assets, then I mean it is
Yeah,
it's kind of easy if they wanted to allow you to
yeah.
store them on wallet and just store them and let them sit there. Maybe you're not buying them, but you're just storing them.
Hmm.
And then it would get more. more engagement of people just kind of coming in and out of the app on a regular basis, and maybe they would pick up on some of the other services they offered within the app. I mean, I feel like that's also part of it too, right? Is that if you offer something where people are constantly going in and looking at their assets, but then it says like, oh, pay for your, here's your gym membership card, or pay for this with your credit card by tapping here, maybe they'll get more engagement on those
Yeah.
offerings.
If they were to create an exchange, what I imagine would be best for them is not to put it into Google Wallet, and even though the term wallet is now associated with cryptocurrencies,
Uh-huh.
but to have an entire like Google Invest platform. And for all I know, it already exists because Google's terrible at marketing with these things.
Yeah.
Um, and it would be all right. Well, you can buy your index funds and your mutual funds and your individual stocks, and by the way, you can also invest in cryptocurrencies and NFTs through this platform.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, that would be an option. Well, this was interesting. This was an interesting day. A lot going on. And we'll stay on top of it. So thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to listen to us today. We really appreciate it. We'll be posting links to many of the sources that we referenced on Twitter. So you can find us, follow us on Twitter at the X Podcast One. That's the X Podcast number one. If you like this podcast, found it interesting or informative, it helps us a great deal if you subscribe or leave a review on whatever platform you use. Thanks, everyone, and we will see you all next week.